Welcome everybody to to the Preferred Adventure Center for another edition of Trailblazer Tuesday. And we're just going to jump right into it. I'm going to start with a story. Now, I changed the names to protect the innocent, so if you think you know who this is about, you don't. All right? But some years ago, quite a few years ago, there was a guy, we'll call him Bob, and Bob's father started a widget factory. Bob's widget dad built this into a wonderful business. Well, Bob takes over, and business gradually starts going downhill as things happen. You know, people don't always need widgets. Sometimes widgets have to turn into whatchamacallits or you don't have anything, right? So sure enough, the business gradually goes downhill, but Bob doesn't do anything about it. He changes it, or he doesn't change anything. He's building his widgets, and eventually the business goes out of business. And Bob actually goes from a larger house, not that he buys a smaller house. Bob gets by, but that's just about it, you know. And his dad was really had a lot, okay? So anyways, then some years later, Jim and Joe are in business together. Now there's about 15 years difference between Jim and Joe. And Joe's watching this business, and they're making these whatchamacallits, and sure enough, things start to go downhill just a little bit. They're gradually selling a little bit less one year than they did the year before. And it's just not working out. And he's looking down, Joe looks down the road and he says, these whatchamacallits aren't going to be needed all the time. And he goes to Jim and he says, Jim, we need to change something. And Jim just didn't want to mess with it anymore. He was getting close enough to retirement that he just didn't want to mess with it, right? So, sure enough, Joe keeps driving home, and every time he drives home, he drives past Bob's house. Bob's out there mowing his yard or whatever, and finally Joe goes back to Jim, and he says, Jim, we have got to change. I drive past Bob's house every day on my way home. And I do not want to end up like Bob. You'll be fine, you're going to retire, but I don't want to end up like Bob. And Jim says, Joe, let's just take a different route home. True story, really happened. What'd Jim do wrong? Really, what would Jim do wrong?
He didn't listen.
He didn't listen. Yeah, it's a little bit more than that.
And plan for the future.
Keep up with the times.
But he didn't, what it really came down to is he was not willing to look at the truth. Okay? Pascal said in like 1640 something, and if you don't know Blaise Pascal, he's a fantastic philosopher. I don't agree with half of what he says, but he's really, really good. Anyways, he said that the majority of people do not choose what they believe based on proof, but based on what is attractive to them. Okay? So, and I'll tell you, I believe by far the majority of the people, they choose what's attractive and then rationalize it back regardless of the truth. And then we all do it some. Everybody does it sometimes. Some people do it. Most people do it almost all the time. A few people manage to do it just some of the time, okay? Anyways, but we all do it some, so don't be too hard on anybody. But that's what Jim was doing. Jim was looking out there, and he was very uncomfortable with changing anything, didn't know what to do, and he refused to admit that they were going downhill, all right? Now, my point here is, and we won't go too much further into it, but because there's about 12 points to this story, really, but we're not going to hit them all. When you're a leader, and every person's a leader sometime. You know, if you're married and you're in a household, chances are one of you more leads than the other. If you have kids, you will be a leader at some time or another. Everybody leads sometimes. Sometimes people lead more than others. But if you're a leader, you have no right to feel comfortable about your situation. You have no right to choose what's attractive. You have to face the truth and then look down the road and try to come up with an answer. And if you don't, everybody you lead suffers. You know, You may feel more comfortable about it, but everybody else in the end is going to suffer. So you have no right to be comfortable. The other thing is, if you do feel comfortable, be very, very careful. Because, I'll give you a great example. In my opinion, it's a great example. Adolf Hitler and Winston Churchill both made decisions that likely cost literally millions of people their lives. Both were willing to look out there, decide what they wanted, why they were doing what they were doing, and make incredibly difficult decisions. When you read their memoirs, who do you think was incredibly uncomfortable with his decisions, and who does it sound like they never really expressed regret or concern at all? Who was comfortable? Hitler. Hitler never seems to show very much discomfort with his decisions whatsoever. And Winston Churchill, even though he voiced very strong opinions and made very difficult decisions, Winston Churchill he drank a fifth of whiskey every day. He was so distraught about his decisions. So, if you're comfortable, might want to be careful, because you might be taking the easy way out. It's easy to be wrong. All right. Any questions, anything like that? Ideas? Concerns? Okay. That was a short one, but thank you for joining us for Trailblazer Tuesday. And remember, life here on earth is not always going to be a walk in the park. So don't just go on a walk, go on an adventure.